All right, so let's look and see what problems we have that are going on here. And the ones that are having the most struggles are these solved by graphing problems. So let's pull that over. I'm going to copy and paste it over here into our drawing screen. All right, solved by graphing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and turn my paper into graph paper. So you need to use a piece of graph paper at home to solve these. So what you've got to do is draw your own little system. So I'm going to draw a y-axis, and I'm going to draw an x-axis. And those are not even close to anything perfect. Let me draw it a little bit better. I'm going to go straight up and down here and straight across here. They don't have to be perfect, but you do want them on a line for the sake of getting the right, numbers going. So this says solve by graphing y is equal to x minus 6 and y is equal to negative x. So these are each a line. This is a line and this is a line. So I'm going to circle this one in blue. We're going to do this one. Y is equal to x minus 6. So remember the parts of the linear equation. Y is equal to mx plus b. This is where it crosses the y-axis, and this is the slope. This tells us how that point moves. We find our first point by looking at this number here. So the first point that I see, that number here is that negative 6. So I'm going to find the negative 6. So I would go on the y-axis, negative 1, negative 2, negative 3, negative 4, negative 5. This is negative 6. So right there is my first point. This is always going to be put with 0 for the x value, and then negative 6 is the y value. That is your first point. That is where it crosses the y-axis. That's what it looks like as a coordinate point. So that is what we do. We just find that number on the y-axis and put a dot there. That's how that works. Now we're going to look for slope, and slope is the number next to the x. Well, there's not a number, which tells us that the number is 1, because 1 is the only number that's invisible when it's next to the x. And we know that slope is y over x. So we have to have a fraction. So that means I need to turn this into a fraction, and the way we turn a whole number into a fraction is by putting it over 1. So our slope is equal to 1 over 1. And it's a positive number. So positive means it's going to go up 1, and it's always to the right 1. So up 1 to the right 1 is the way we're going to move this point. So up 1 to the right 1. There's our next point. Up 1 to the right 1. There's our next point. Up 1 to the right. Up 1 to the right. Up 1 over 1, up 1 over 1. So there's our line. That's where it lives in this system. Okay? So now let's do the next line in red so we can see it better. And again, we're looking for this same thing, right? Y is equal to mx plus b. So y is equal to negative x. We know that the plus b is where it intersects on the y-axis. There's not a plus b. Whenever there's not a plus b, whenever there's not a plus number, we can add 0. It's always adding 0. If there's not a number here, we're not adding anything. We're not subtracting anything. So it's 0. So that means our intercept point is 0, 0. Because this is the y value that goes with 0 as the x value. So that means this is where we start. Now again, we need to find the slope. And the slope is going to be the y over x. That tells us the movement of this first point. So here we have a negative x. Well, we know there's not a number here, which means the only number that's invisible is 1. So we have a negative 1, which we need to turn into a fraction by putting it over 1. It's a negative number, so it goes down. And then this is always to the right. So down 1 over 1. So down 1 over 1. Down 1 over 1. Down 1 over 1. Excuse me. Down 1 over 1. Down 1 over 1. We already see where it intersects. We see our interception point. This is 1, 2, 3, and this is -1, -2, -3, right? So our interception point is going to be a +3 on the x-axis and a -3 on the y-axis. That is going to be how you solve by graphing. You take the line that you're given and you take it apart by finding the y-intercept and the slope, and you draw your line. Where they intersect, that is your answer. That is what we're looking for. So the answer is 3, -3. So we would go back over to Jupiter, and that's what you type. Parenthesis, 3, comma, -3, close parenthesis. And then we check that answer, and that's correct. So we go to the next problem. Here is, did we do that one? Yeah. Here's the next one. Excuse me. We're going to do it the same way. Let me capture this. Take it over to our drawing problem screen. Let's make it big enough to see. Here we go. All right, so I'm going to draw a Cartesian coordinate system. I have my y-axis. I have my x-axis. Okay, I'm going to make this one blue. Y is equal to x plus 1. I can just look at this, and I can see from this number right here that that is going to be my first point, and it's 0, +1. So at 0, +1, I make my first point. Now I'm going to look right here, and there's not a number. I know the only invisible number is 1. So 1 is the slope. I know slope is y over x, so that means I need to make it a fraction, 1 over 1. It's a positive number, so it's going to go up 1 to the right 1. Okay, so that's how this moves. Up to the right, up to the right, up to the right. 1 space up, 1 space over. And I just do that however many times I feel like. And then I draw my line just to show that I know where it lives in this system. Right, so there's my line. I'm going to do the other one in red just to show the difference easier. So again, the first thing I look for is this number on the end. I pair it with 0 as my x point, 0, -1. So that's where I make my first little point right here. Now I'm going to look for my slope. There's no number here, so there's an invisible 1, right? So again, my slope is -1, make it a fraction, over 1. It's negative, so it's going down, and this is always going to go to the right. So down 1 over 1. So down 1 over 1. Down 1 over 1. Down 1 over 1. And that's enough for me to see that I'm going in the wrong direction to cross that line. So I'm going to reverse my angle by drawing my line through these points and then just extending it at the same angle enough to cross that line, which would be, this point right here where it crosses. It intersects the blue line there. That's all I need to know in order to find the point of intersection, is where that line lives in this Cartesian coordinate system. Now that I have the point where they cross, I can really easily just identify that. So it is at the -1 on the x-axis, and it is at the 0 on the y-axis, because anything on the x-axis is at the 0 of the y-axis. Okay, so that would be my answer, -1, 0 as a coordinate point. So I go back in here and I type it. -1, 0 is my answer, and I check it, and it's correct. So that's how you would solve by graphing without being given the graph. It's asking you for the coordinate point where they intersect, where those two lines intersect. So you have to draw them on your own graph paper, or you can actually make your own graph paper by just taking a sheet of notebook paper and turning it 90 degrees underneath so that you can see the lines from the page under the bottom, and it looks like graph paper. Okay, that's all I have for this lesson. If you have any more questions, please ask.